We are talking with Conor O'Neill. He is the guru of all things Duke and Wake Forest for the Rivals.com network. And then we're even going to throw in some North Carolina talk just to round out portal talk. This is the ultimate Tobacco Road portal pod. My name is Jacey Zembal. I am part of Rivals.com also, NC State Rivals, also in charge of the portal this year. It has been a very eventful last 3 weeks, learning and seeing all the things. In fact, as we just started this podcast, Mark Mitchell from Duke is committed to Missouri. So news is happening all over the place, and maybe a player that Conor will end up covering at some point in his recruitment or chase. Desmond Claudy from Xavier has entered the portal. You have to love a sophomore who's averaging 16 a game who could drop into somebody's lap for the next 2 years. I mean, that's college basketball basically in 2024. You can get an all-conference player dropping into your lap during a 3-week period of the spring. It's wild. But I think for all these schools, I mean, I've been impressed in a roundabout way of how cutthroat John Shire has been. He has trimmed a lot from the Duke roster, then combined that with Kyle Filipowski and Jared McCain going to the NBA. I think Wake Forest maybe did not expect as many players to have to fill on the scholarship level. And then NC State, they just landed 2 already in Brandon Huntley Hatfield from Louisville Center. And just last night, the rare UNC/Georgetown to NC State transfer, Dontrez Styles, has joined the Wolfpack. That was round 3 in recruiting Dontrez. Wolfpack wanted him out of high school. Then they tried after he left UNC, and they finally got it done after he left Georgetown. And then, the one thing I'd say about UNC more than anything, they have to get a center. Whoever that is, whether it's a Wolf from Yale, Jonas Adu, who they've tried, but maybe is favoring Baylor, Clifford your Oruyimi from Rutgers. I know I just butchered his last name.
I think it's Omori.
Omori, yeah, who I love. And I know UNC has been linked with the Kentucky power forward, which is a little surprising, but it just shows you how vast the networker players that Kentucky is. He's probably more power forward, so that makes you wonder what will happen with him. But have you been surprised at all with the exodus at Duke?
Not really. I think TJ Power last night was the first one that was even like an on the fence type of thing. And when you have a 5-star recruit come in and play, I think he had 10 DNPs and really was only used for a couple minutes at a time as a spot up 3-point shooter and nothing more, then you kind of have it in the back of your mind. Now it's funny how quickly we've gotten to this point, but you have it in the back of your mind like that's a kid that could enter the portal and look for a new role and look for a fresh start. And so Jaden Schutt and Christian Reeves, I don't know how Duke could have expected to wait on either one of them to get healthy. Mark Mitchell has next year's #1 overall pick coming in at his position. So he was either going to play out of position again, which the rumor mill flows with how unhappy he was playing the 4 this year. And so if he's not going to play over Cooper Flag and he doesn't want to play the 4, then what role is there for him at Duke? He's a 2-year starter. Like, he's not going to all of a sudden go to the bench and play 18 minutes a game. I guess the only real surprise was Jeremy Roach going to the portal. I just figured he would go to the NBA. But he might be able to make more money if he goes to Baylor. I know the $1.5 million was thrown out there on Twitter last night, and I think I saw something where Jeremy even chimed in and said he wishes that was the case.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's the case.
Yeah, I mean the numbers. I always say this with NIL stuff: like, nobody has any incentive to tell the truth.
No,
like, players can tell their buddies that they're making this much when they're really only making this much, and agents can tell everybody that, hey, I got my guy 1.2 million when they're only making like 600,000, something like, and the schools want to boost the numbers in their favor to show everybody else that they can pay that much. And
Yeah. Or they're
it's
ashamed
just
of paying that much, one or the other.
right. It's just the biggest liar's poker that there is in sports right now.
It's
So it makes
fascinating.
it really difficult.
I'll share one quick story where we work our way back to Duke, and I'm not going to call the kid out, but let's just say there was a kid who had Big Ten schools going back and forth over him. And to show you how this game works, one school backed off at a certain point, but the other school didn't know that the other school had backed off. So the agent just kept hitting it hard and hard and hard. And next, the guy got maybe 100,000 more because the school X didn't know that school Y had backed off.
Right.
That's the beauty of what's going on right now is that, I mean, unless a school is willing to talk with each other, they may not even know they're in a mythical bidding war.
Yeah, so when people use the term Wild West, that's what it means. Or that's one of the parts. But no, Duke
Which is
needed
always
space.
complemented by my favorite other word. I love it when people throw out guardrails.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Gotta love having guardrails.
I think we need collective bargaining and contracts, and I don't know if you can salary cap it or not, but there needs to be something. I love the NBA comparisons because people are, oh, this is just the NBA. Well, no, it's not. The NBA, like the Bucks at least know that they've got Giannis under contract.
I know.
This is every single player is a potential free agent.
It's crazy. So
Yeah.
what needs do you think Duke has right now?
I think Duke has two primary needs. They need a veteran guard who can play, who probably needs to be comfortable coming off the bench, or you're going to tell at the best is going to compete with Caleb Foster for a starting role in the preseason. Because I think Tyrese Proctor is your starting point guard, and I think Caleb Foster moves to off the ball with the potential to be a point guard also. But I think you need a veteran guard behind those two or next to those two. And that basically gives you three good guards, three really solid players for two spots. I don't expect Duke to play much of a three guard lineup. I think that worked at times this year, but I don't think it is something John Shire is going to actively pursue for the rest of his career. And then I think you need a four. I think you need somebody who can step in and stretch the floor. I think you need somebody who can complement Cooper Flagg and Kamen Malawak. I don't think that's Sean Stewart, which is now the last domino we're waiting on with Duke's roster. I mean, we might see a complete exodus if Sean Stewart leaves. He's the 9th player to either enter the portal or NBA since the end of the season. And I just, looking at his skill set, I don't know that you can look at him and say, hey, well, he's going to be Duke's 4 next year. No, I think they need somebody. They ran the flag up the pole with Amari Williams, the Drexel kid. They have Malik Brown in, I think, right now for a visit as we speak. There's another forward in there. Brandon Angel from Stanford is another one that they're looking at. I think he shot over 40% on threes this year.
He's a good stretch for.
Yeah, and
not the most athletic guy in the world, but a solid stretch for.
Well, it's and for Duke, it's hard not to look down the road and say, well, Harrison Ingram certainly worked out for Carolina. Let's get us a Stanford 4 and see what kind of damage he can do for us.
Didn't they already do that with a walk-on this past year?
Yeah, I mean Neil Begovic was there to boost the GPA. Neil's a big body, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I like Malik Brown. Malik Brown, I felt like he was on an island at Syracuse this year, and that they didn't really have a traditional power forward. So he basically had to do a lot of the inside work by himself. I liked how he competed against centers, even though he was not the biggest guy around weight-wise. I'd say he's probably about 6'9", but I don't know what his listed weight is, but he's probably going to gain 20 pounds over the next few years, is my guess, between just natural maturation and weight room work. But he worked his butt off. I think he was around like what, a little under 10 points and around 7 boards, maybe. To me, he is a good role player who you don't have to run plays for. He'll just go and make things happen on his own, hitting the boards, getting out on the break a little bit because he can run well. And he might have that position versatility where he can play both the 4 and the 5.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you said there is somebody that doesn't need plays run for him. Like, you're bringing in Cooper Flagg, you're bringing back 2 guards that think they're NBA players. Whether Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster are in the NBA in 2025 is irrelevant for this discussion. They think they're themselves as NBA players. So you need you don't need somebody who has to have the ball in their hands to score. You don't need that guy. You don't need that guy in the portal. It's a lot narrower of a search radius when you're looking for somebody that doesn't necessarily need to be ball dominant in the portal, because a lot of guys are in the portal because they haven't gotten the ball as much as they want it. So that's a key thing that Duke is looking for, and I think that's why Malik Brown is the first visitor for them, honestly. Like, that's why he's a high priority target. And I didn't get an answer when I asked if they could get a commit out of this visit, but I would hazard a guess toward it trending that way if everything goes well on the visit. Such.
Sure. I think that the Twitters have had, Cody Bria from Dayton linked to Duke a little bit, and Aiden Matheny from St. Mary's, perhaps. These are obviously guys that are just kind of like just entered the portal, just trying to figure out what their next move is. But, in Bria's case, boy, can he shoot. I mean, he's like 49.8%. He is a absolute knockdown in a multiple kind of ways, whether spotting up, running off the screens, catch and shoot. He is just a really good gifted shooter. And it'll be interesting to see if that will be a specific need that Duke looks like on the wing. I think NC State filled a very specific need last night with Dontrez Styles. It's funny. The first 2 recruitments, it was all about Styles being a small ball 4. But now with NC State doing so well with a bigger lineup, it might be more as a 3, for the Wolfpack. And I think that's how it'll turn out if the roster stays intact. I like the sound of, at least, of having a 6'6" Styles, 6'10" Muhammad Diarra, assuming he's back, and 6'10"-ish Brandon Huntley Hatfield from Louisville, with Ben Middlebrooks behind the 2 bigs, who's also around 6'10".
Middlebrooks still has eligibility?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We will see a lot of Danny Cannell next year. Danny will be flying the flag for Ben's last year. Now, what will be fascinating is all these guys are seniors, all 4 of them. So you can imagine what it'll be like between trying to sign high school kids and portal guys. A, there's minutes galore. B, you'll probably have to compete for them because they're going to have to bring in 4 or 5 bigs next year.
Yeah.
Because that's just the reality of having that many seniors. Huntley Hatfield, who we both saw with Louisville, I thought of him as a guy that maybe didn't really know who he was when he got to Louisville. Highly, highly, highly hyped up player in high school at certain points. Ended up early enrolling, graduating early from high school and going to Tennessee. Probably in his mind thought he was a 3. Like a lot of these big guys are. Probably wanted to shoot 3-pointers. Did not have a banner freshman year. Did not have the one and done campaign that maybe he thought he was going to have. A little bit of a disappointment. Ends up transferring to Louisville. I'm sure at the time when he transferred to Louisville, he thought he'd be part of the rebirth with Kenny Payne. I think they went 12-52 the last 2 years. Right. So no rebirth in terms of the winning, but I think by his second year at Louisville as a junior, he found himself and he learned that he
had a rebirth.
Yeah, he really, despite all the losing, I think he found who he was and that he is a center and a good center. A guy that that maybe you don't dump the ball off on the block every trip down like you do with a DJ Burns, but a guy that you definitely can do that with and will be a factor defensively. And, I think NC State will have a radically different defense in terms of how they approach pick and rolls because of a Huntley Hatfield. State still has a couple scholarships to use, at least as of now. Maybe there's some more attrition on the horizon. I do think that they will go for the right point guard. I don't think, I think they have two ways of doing this. They could get a combo who ends up being a guy who tag teams with Michael O'Connell, or they can get like someone who's just a home run. There's some talk about who could be a home run, but the problem is he's not in the portal yet. So that's kind of a drawback. But if there's a home run guy that ends up entering the portal, then it would make sense. I don't, to me, like you got to accumulate as much talent as humanly possible. And then the second Scully besides a point guard, I think would be best shooter, or possibly a developmental big, which could be tricky because of what we just talked about. There's no big men on the roster for 2025, 2026. So if there was a way to get a younger big guy to give him 4 post players this year, but then have somebody to build around a year from now, I think that would be ideal too. In terms of best shooter, they had Ryan Conwell officially visit already, and he was looking like he would also visit Ohio State. Instead, he spent a lot of time apparently at Xavier, and then apparently might be even going to Vanderbilt this weekend. So I don't know what will happen there, but Conwell is a terrific shooter from Indiana State, a lefty. Larry Dixon, who's one of the assistant coaches on the staff, he coached him at South Florida, so there's a connection there. Conwell's friendly with Jane Taylor, who's also from Indianapolis. They're both from Naptown, so there's a friendship there. So that's kind of how I see NC State in the portal world right now. I think when it's all said and done, they're gonna have two things that they've tried to do in the past. I call it Noah's Ark. 2 guys at each position.
Yeah.
And have that rotation where they can go 9-10 if needed, and not have a huge drop off from first string to second string. The complement to that is balanced scoring. It's not going to be a situation where you have a Tre'Quavion Smith try to score 20 plus. I don't know if there'll be that one guy that is very shot dominant. So I see a lineup where there'll be a lot of guys between 12 and 15 points. That would be my guess, is 5 starters who all are in that 12 to 15 point range for points per game. And that works in college basketball in 2024. You don't have to have NBA talent. The Final Four, you might have a couple of NBA guys. There was no sure things other than maybe Donovan Clingan. And then I still hold a torch that there'll be some sort of role for Zach Edey, but of Purdue, and Clingan of Connecticut. And Stephon Castle would be the other one who will go in the first round from Connecticut. That could truly be it for first round talent. Maybe not so much Edey. He might be more of a second round guy. But, Alabama's best prospect is probably Grant Nelson.
Edey's finally worked his way into the mocks that I've seen, but it's crazy. It's crazy that the 2-time unanimous player of the year, national player of the year, had to do all of this to be considered a first round pick.
I think what they're probably scared to death with Edey is what happens when you have like a Steph Curry kind of point guard dancing around in a pick and roll 25 feet from the basket.
Yeah.
Like he's not hedging. He's not getting out on the guard. So then you give up the 3, or basically you're making your teammate guard, Edey's teammate, to really fight through the screen to get out to Curry, or any other outside shooting point guard. That's how the NBA game has evolved. Is can you defend out 25 feet with your center, and that's the tricky part. And I'll be curious. Now I do think Edey will score though. Against specifically, like there'll be stretches where he'll play backup bigs. and he could score on them. You would like to think that he'll shoot right over them. But I know one player that will not be scoring anymore for Wake Forest is Andrew Carr. As everybody is jokingly or affectionately called Steve Forbes, the Portal King, he's got work to do again.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more than expected. Andrew Carr, like you never count on losing two starters. And you're already counting on that's not including Hunter Salas, who everybody pretty much knew was going to be an NBA player. I mean, he looked like an NBA player by December. The Kevin Miller situation is he wants to maximize his value. I thought he was not a great fit at Wake Forest. I think in Steve's offense, it's geared more toward a distributor at point guard, and that is not his game. He is a score first point guard. Andrew Carr, though, was kind of the perfect fit, if there can be such a thing, at Wake Forest last 2 years. Like he was a four that could give you some minutes at the five if the other team went a little smaller. He could shoot threes. He rebounded. He defended. He did a lot of things on the interior that made things work. And look, there were whispers and rumors like 3 weeks ago that they were going to lose him, and then those all kind of got stamped out. So I think Wake thought they had kind of won the battle there to keep him, and then all of a sudden last week you start hearing the same things, and it just snowballed, and they lost him. I've heard a few things that make it seem really clear that he's going to go to Villanova. So with that in mind, he's been in the portal a week. I don't think I've seen anything about him taking a visit anywhere. So I'm kind of curious. Yeah, I'm kind of curious why he hasn't already committed to Villanova. I don't know.
Villanova lost their center. It looks like he will enter the NBA draft, even though I don't see him being an NBA player. But Eric Dixon, big 6'7", 6'8", wide body.
Gotcha.
A guy that the NFL would probably look at and be like, put 30 more pounds on him. Maybe he could play a tackle for us. I mean, he's a big dude. But, Villanova's been active, just not so much in the post.
Yeah, so I think he makes sense of Villanova, but then after Andrew Carr enters, you start hearing, well, Kentucky wants him, or Arkansas is looking at him, and all the big hitters of the transfer portal, like they're not dumb, and they can put on the tape and see that this guy for 2 years has been an ACC starter, has a nice block rate, can play the four, can be a 35 to 40% 3-point shooter. He can check a lot of boxes. He can check a lot of boxes.
He was a 12-7 guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. He went nuts in that game in Raleigh when it felt like he couldn't miss anything. And
28 points.
Yeah. Just a really solid all around player. He's gonna have a lot of suitors.
So just to interrupt the pod because we have breaking news.
Oh boy.
The pod is so hot that Sean Stewart has indeed entered the portal. Well, will be entering the portal.
All right. There's that one.
So now was it 9 players have left Duke?
Yeah, that's 9.
Woo!
And the only 2 left are the 2 that have said they're not leaving.
Crazy.
Yeah, let me hammer out a tweet real quick about that one.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is life of a reporter during April. This is reality. At any moment, at any time, from 9 a.m. or maybe even as early as 8 a.m. until midnight, you just never know when something will pop up. And what's crazy this week is people may not know this. This is not a football pod about the portal, but they just got going too. So as our man Conor O'Neill is breaking news all over the place, football started, and I think 29 players from the ACC entered the portal on the first day. Not as many on the second day. Now, what's interesting is some say that the NAL checks for these football players end next week. So they are hanging in there to get that final check, and then they'll enter the portal. So if there's any validity to that, there could be some big names in the portal starting next week. Um, but surprisingly though, not as much movement on Tobacco Road for football portal. Tad Hudson and DJ Geth have left UNC, and Duncanson, who's a defensive back. State lost Julian Gray, a wide receiver kick returner, and Nick Campbell, a reserve nose tackle. Very, very quiet on the Duke front. In fact, the one player in the portal wasn't even on the team last year, Daquan Johnson, a former defensive back. And then very quiet on the Wake Forest front in terms of the portal. So, we didn't expect to include some football portal news on this, but you know what? We improvise. It's what we do. That's why we're pros. So, but yeah, very, very crazy times at Wake where literally two starters are back, and it will be fascinating to see how they fill the lineup around an Efton Reed and a Cam Hildreth. Is there
They've already got one. They've already got one coming aboard with Trayvon Spillers.
Yes, good to remind that. That is a nice pickup as a power forward from App State. And who did Wake Forest play in the NIT?
App State, first round.
There
and
you go.
He had a double against them.
Nice tryout, huh?
Yeah, and one reporter even made a offhanded suggestion that after the game, Wake Forest should see if he wanted to stick around Winston-Salem and get a tour, and if he liked it, they should try to get him into the school. And I want to make clear that was not any kind of tampering. It was just me making a pretty dumb joke that came to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's nothing like recruiting in the handshake line.
Yeah, right. Now we're going to be asked soon enough to describe how each coach went through the handshake line and who it looked like they spent more time talking to than another player.
There's a story I know where there was a team from the Big 12 who went through the handshake line, and one of their players was a little disgruntled at the time. And he goes through the handshake line and he sees one of the coaches that he knows from the other team that they just played and defeated. And he said something along the lines of, team looks good. Maybe keep a spot for me. True story. He ended up transferring to that team. And I'm like, when I heard that story, I'm like, oh, this starts all the way back in like November. I mean, you just never know what might happen to the handshake line.
Yeah, that's going to lead some coaches to join my bandwagon of banning handshake lines.
So, and then we'll just wrap it up a little bit on UNC talk. Like I said, center has to be the number one priority, obviously, unless Armando Bacot gets a, 7th year of eligibility somehow, some way. But, Jalen Washington is the post player coming back, and I'll give Jalen about 6'8". I just don't see him as a starting center. Jalen Withers, I believe, is also back, also probably in that 6'8" range. So I'll be curious to see what the Tar Heels end up ultimately doing at center, assuming RJ Davis is back. Love the athletic wings that they'll be adding. It'll be a different look with Ian Jackson and Drake Powell coming in on the recruiting. Elliot Cadeau obviously is going to want to play fast with the lineup that I think they could have next year. Big thing with Cadeau is obviously improving his 3-point shooting. And then if Harrison Ingram is back along with RJ Davis, well, then you have two guys who are capable of being all ACC type players. So it really does come down to center in my mind. I mentioned Wolf earlier. He's from Yale, and he's originally from the Chicago area. And there's been a lot of talk about Michigan and a little bit with, UNC and some other schools, but he's kind of kept it low key so far, which is kind of interesting. He's a big body. He's in that 6'11", 6'10" range. Very good rebounder in the Ivy League. I know that there is a debate among college coaches about Ivy League players. I could see it work both ways. I've seen some work out well, and then obviously some have not really done a lot with their next stop. what was it, Atkinson at Notre Dame? What was he went from Yale to Notre Dame. The name escapes me, but 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago? It was basically Mike Bray's last good Notre Dame team. And I thought he was a huge reason why, because they were lacking a center and they brought him in from Yale and he did his job. He's a very good player for them.
It's a
You
good
know,
memory. Paul Atkinson.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what his numbers were, but I bet he was in that 11 and 8 range, or something like that. But he was a big physical center that Notre Dame just didn't have on the roster. So that was an example of a player going from the Ivy League to a high major school and transitioning well. And in fact, one of my top 10 portal guys is Malik Mack, who I love, from Harvard, quick freshman point guard who just picked Georgetown. And then another Ivy League guy who I think will flawlessly translate is Tyler Perkins, who's going from Pennsylvania to Villanova as a wing. So I do think that guys in the Ivy League can do well. But obviously it will be interesting to see. The one nitpick I have with Wolf is he's not the quickest of feet. So, that'll be interesting to see. I don't think UNC doesn't seem to be involved with the center from Drexel, Amari Williams, who's very good. We mentioned Jonas Adu, who they brought in for a visit. Now he's checking out Baylor. I want to say there's a third school involved with him, but I can't remember exactly who that third school is. But Jonas, obviously from Durham, North Carolina, he would fit flawlessly into what UNC does. Legit 7-footer, 6'11" guy. They've been linked with Kate Tyson, who visited, a great shooter from went to Matthews Carmel Christian and helped them win the state title against Greensboro Day. Younger brother of Hunter Tyson from Clemson, who's now in the NBA on a two-way contract, I believe. Ironically, Clemson never recruited Kate Tyson out of high school, and then he went to Belmont, and it was like 16 points and like 45% from three. So this Clemson team that just went to the Elite Eight could have had that. Probably could have snapped their fingers, and he would have been a Tiger that for the last 2 years.
Would have been a lot better for him than Alex Hemingway did.
Well, one thing that the slot that Tyson would have played ended up being played by Jack Clark down the stretch, the former NC State player / LaSalle player, who is now looking for a 7th year of college and a 4th school. So that is what is happening with Mr. Jack Clark. If he can get a waiver for I guess he's like 20, he played like 29%, which Chapel Fowler has tweeted about and discovered very astutely weeks ago. So he might get that 7th year. He's had injuries and then the extra COVID year, so that's how that happened. And then I even seen some linkage to Andrei Stojakovic, Paige's son, from Stanford, who was okay as a freshman. I think it was probably a tough deal for handling expectations when you're the son of a legit legend. I mean, I think everyone will agree, and I don't know if Peja Stojakovic is in the Hall of Fame now, but I think he will be if he isn't. I mean, to me, he's a top 5 European player ever. And then obviously Andre comes up, gets a lot of attention. I got to see him with the Compton Magic. Very skilled, very fluid, 6'7", but kind of more of a 2, but could be a 3. Killer with the pull-up jumper from 15 to 17. Had flashes, but I don't know. I think people kind of graded him on a curve because of who his dad is. So when you're a freshman at Stanford and you average 7 points a game or whatever it was, people may be a little harder on him than they should be. But I do think he will be a very good player. It'll be interesting to see if UNC ends up really turning up the heat. But I'll leave this pot on one thing, and we'll see if you agree. If a player visits your school and doesn't commit that weekend, what usually happens?
Say it one more time.
I said if a player officially visits the school and doesn't commit, what usually happens? He's not going to that college. See, these guys are committing so fast right now. So fast. It's one visit and done.
Well, that's why Steve Forbes refers to the transfer portal as speed dating.
Yeah. I've used that term for years.
high school recruiting is like a courtship and an actual relationship, and you get to know not only the player but his parents, his uncles, aunts, grandparents, whoever is in the kid's circle. Transfer portal recruiting is get to know the person. All right, let's get married, let's get hitched, like night of the first date or whatever. Like it is crazy how fast the stuff matriculates.
Yeah. And I'll do a send off. Where can we find your work, Mr. Conor O'Neill?
For Duke, Devils Illustrated is duke.rivals.com. For Wake Forest, it's wakeforest.rivals.com.
And as I said, we have a lot of coverage, a lot of breaking news on Twitter at the Rivals Portal or Portal Rivals, one of them or the other. I can't even keep track. I'm that tired after a gazillion tweets over the last couple of weeks. But what's crazy is, ACC fans. We'll just leave it on this. I'll be technically correct, at Rivals Portal. So everybody can go to at Rivals Portal, see all the players that enter the portal, football or basketball at this time of the year. Even throwing a few women's basketball players. Pittsburgh lost their star player. Big news in Miami yesterday. The Cavendish twins are back. But Virginia Tech, decimated. Going to be extremely active in the portal. Boston College, like nothing I've ever seen. All their guys, almost every one of them. There's like one guy that's Donald Hand Jr. is the one that's left to turn the lights on. Like they are going to be adding guys in the portal all over the place. Florida State has a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. They lost all their big guys. Baba Miller, Cam Corrin, Deontay Green. Cam Corrin actually going to Pittsburgh, staying in the league.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which, how about this? Staying in the league has now become normal.
Yeah.
How about that? All those hand wringing for all those decades, now normal. Remember all those years? We can't let this kid go in the league. We will bar him from 35 schools. That's why the portal was created. People may not understand this. The whole point of the portal and the rules, as we wrap this up, is because there was time where coaches would put like 35 schools and say, you can't go to them without a waiver. And that's how this whole thing started, is like coaches were extremely anti-player, and then slowly but surely the players became now completely in control of the process. So, but this is Jacey Zembal. We were with Conor O'Neill. This is the ultimate portal pod where we worked in football, basketball, women's basketball, even at the end. So have a great weekend, everybody. On to the portal.